In the last lecture, we used a branch and introduced a Boolean to allow our wall to bridge blueprint to carry our player character back to the initial part of the level. It worked well, but still had one minor problem. The bridge isn't reusable. In this lecture, I will teach you how to make the bridge reusable. But first, I have to tell you that you already can achieve this by yourself. I will only give you a hint. You can introduce another Boolean to make the bridge reusable. Please pause the lecture here and try to do it on your own. I'm sure you can pull it off. Okay, let's begin. There are at least a dozen of ways that come to my mind on how to solve our issue and make the bridge reusable. Since we're currently dealing with Booleans and branches, let's try to fix the problem introducing a new Boolean to our blueprint. Please open the wall to bridge blueprint. Now we need to create another variable of type Boolean by clicking on this small plus icon. We need to give this Boolean a meaningful name. Why don't we call it should tilt with a question mark, as if we are asking Unreal Engine, should the bridge tilt or not? This Boolean needs to be true by default. To do so, first we need to compile the blueprint. Now, set the default value of the should tilt Boolean to true by ticking this checkbox. Let's analyze our blueprint. This timeline deals with first part of the event, where the wall tilts into a bridge. We need this to happen only once, right? How do we tell that to the game engine? Well, we can do it by implementing a branch before the timeline. Please do exactly what I do. First, I will make some space, so our new branch fits well. Now, I will right-click somewhere in this location, search for branch and add it to the event graph. Then I will hook everything up like this. I'll plug our should tilt Boolean in a condition input pin of the branch. So, if the value of branch is true, it should play the first timeline. If it's false, it should start playing from the second timeline. I will tidy up the graph a bit by introducing two rewrote pins. Okay, now we need to tell the engine when the value of our should tilt Boolean has to change to false. This should be done somewhere by the end of the flow. I will disconnect this node by holding the Alt key on my keyboard and right-clicking on this pin. Let's move this node away a bit. Now we can drag out the should tilt Boolean. Release it somewhere here and choose Set from the context menu that just appeared. Hook it up with the rewrote pin that comes from the finished execution pin of the second timeline. Okay, we have one final thing to do. You see, if we played this game now, the bridge wouldn't have worked properly. That's because of this branch node. This branch tells Unreal Engine that if the value of is at end location Boolean is true, it should start carrying our player character from the finish line back to the initial part of the level. So the problem would occur after we would return from the finish line to the initial part of the level. Basically, it won't take us back to the finish line for the second time. So what do? We need to tell Unreal Engine where the bridge is exactly. Here we tell it that it's at the end location, but we never tell it that it isn't at the end location after returning to the initial location. So Unreal Engine thinks that this blueprint is still at the end location, while it isn't. Basically, we need a node that will make the Boolean as at end location true after it reaches the finish line. However, if we use the bridge to return to the initial part of the level, the same node needs to tell that Boolean as at end location is false. Lucky for us, the Unreal Engine has a very nifty node that will help us achieve this goal. It's called flip-flop. Drag from this execution pin and search for flip-flop. Now hook up the A execution pin with Boolean is at end location input execution pin. Good. Now we can copy and paste this Boolean and hook it with the B execution pin of the flip-flop node. However, this time its value should be set to false. Okay, let me quickly explain what goes on here. The first time our code is executed, the pin will fire. To be more precise, the is at end location Boolean will be set to true once the bridge arrives near the finish line. If we use the bridge again, it will fire the B execution pin of the flip-flop. So, no matter how many times our player character uses the bridge, the Unreal Engine will always know whether it's at end location or at the initial location. Now we can compile this blueprint and test the game. Whenever our player character reaches the invisible trigger of the wall to bridge blueprint, this make it a bridge event will fire. Then the engine will ask us whether the bridge is at end location. Since this value was false by default, the execution flow will take us to this branch. This branch asks us whether the wall should tilt and become bridge. Since it's the first time we're doing it, we need this value to be true. We set its value to true when we created the should tilt boolean. Now the execution flow will take us to this tilt the bridge timeline. When timeline finishes execution and fully turns a wall into a bridge, it will carry us to the second timeline. This timeline is responsible to carry our player character to the finish line. Once the second timeline finishes execution, the should tilt boolean will be set to false. Note that it will never become true again, since we need the wall to turn into a bridge only once. It should remain bridge until we restart the whole game. Since it's the first time we execute this flip-flop node, it will fire from its pin. This will set the is at end boolean to true. If we decide to return to the initial part of the level, we will overlap the invisible trigger of the wall to bridge blueprint again. Thus, the execution flow will start from the beginning. Again, the game engine will ask us whether the bridge is at its end location. Since we set the is at end location boolean to true via the flip-flop node, it will execute this timeline in reverse. Upon reaching the starting point of the level, the game engine will set this should tilt boolean to false again. It was false already, and we need it to be false. So setting it to false from false will simply keep it false, and it won't interfere with our flow. Finally, since this flip-flop node has already executed a pin previously, now it will execute the B pin and set is at end location boolean to false. That's exactly what we want since the bridge is at its initial location at the moment. Now, if we try to use the bridge again, the execution flow will begin from start. Via the B execution pin of the flip-flop node, we set the value of is at end location to false. So Unreal Engine knows that the bridge is at its initial location. It will repeat the process and do exactly what we need it to do. I sincerely hope you understood everything. It might not be the easiest thing to grasp as a beginner, but I'm sure you'll fully understand what goes on here if you do everything without my assistance. As you probably guessed, your assignment is to build the whole blueprint from scratch. Please do it on your own until you proceed to the next lecture. Don't ignore this assignment. You will never become a good developer without practice. So practice what you learned as much as possible. As always, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next lecture.